Hey everybody, Dr. Jared Skowron from Spectrum Awakening. Today we're going to be talking about focus, we're going to talk about ADHD. How do I get my child to pay more attention? And just like when my wife tells me, hey, why don't you pay more attention? What she really means is, why aren't you doing what I ask you to do? So it's all about how can we get our kids not just to listen to the words, but to understand, to process, and then to execute. So we're going to be talking about this paying attention, having more focus, producing more, and that kind of all comes under the four letters of ADHD. Now, let's start into some research right away, because when I talk to people and they come in for visits, because we see patients in our office, we have telemedicine appointments, and a lot of my patients will say, hey, my child has a diagnosis of autism and a diagnosis of ADHD. And I always wonder, are those things different, or are they all part of one global process that's occurring inside the brain? Because any diagnosis of any of these kind of psychological issues are all subjective, okay? How do you get diagnosed with autism? Well, somebody watches your child and makes an opinion of their skills and says, you have autism, okay? Delayed language, not speaking to me, not making eye contact with me, not doing these certain things that I observe that a child should do. That's how we get that diagnosis. Same thing happens with ADHD. There's no blood test. There's no MRI that diagnoses ADHD. It's basically just somebody saying, hey, you're not paying attention to me. You're not doing what I ask. You're not paying attention in school. You're not doing what the teacher says. So we're going to give you this ADHD diagnosis. And obviously this is an oversimplification of it all, but you get the idea that this is all a subjective analysis. There's no objectivity to it. So that being said, and I'll show my first research study, ADHD and autism, is this a differential diagnosis, or are they overlapping traits? Which basically means, hey, is my lack of focus separate from my autism, or is it just part of the autism? And I think that's an important thing for us to understand as we're trying to help our child, is to understand biologically where this is all coming from. Where is my delayed language? Where is my problems sleeping, my problems with my behavior, my problems with my focus and my intention? Where are they all coming from biologically inside the body, so we can address things more at their core? A lot of times, and this is just kind of how conventional medicine is, in order to prescribe a therapy, in order to prescribe a drug, if I'm going to prescribe a drug, I need a diagnosis, okay? So sometimes the diagnoses are encouraged so that the pharmaceutical can be prescribed. Because if there's no diagnosis, you might be prescribing something off label, and that might come back to hurt the prescribing physician. Or the insurance company may not pay for it because we don't have the diagnosis. So there's all of a sudden we get involved in all these red tape issues, which have nothing to do with medicine, have nothing to do with helping someone, just has to do with all these legal hoops that we've created in our conventional medical model, that, hey, if you want this treatment, if you want this drug, I need this diagnosis, I need these symptoms, and we kind of back through it. So I'd like to look at all this without all that red tape and say, okay, what is going on with my child symptomatically? All right, language problems, behavior problems, sleep problems, focus and attention problems. I could give that any name I want. I can say autism, I can say ADHD, I can say hoobity bobbity, whatever. I'm naming a group of symptoms without understanding that biology. So I want to get down to that root of biology, because that's a better way to help everything across the board, okay? And I know that's not how we're raised to think. We're raised to think in our modern world, oh, I have strep throat, I take antibiotics. I have ADHD, I take Ritalin, all right? And that's kind of the one-to-one that really moves our conventional medical model of pharmaceutical sales, okay? So let's get down to the core of, as that research study said, are autism and ADHD different, or are they symptoms of the same biological process? And where does that biological process come from? So let's break down the internal biology and the internal chemical cause of ADHD. And in order to do that, a great way to think about it is to look at the pharmaceutical treatments, okay? So let's talk about the pharmaceutical treatments of ADHD. I'm not saying you should use them, but I want to describe the chemistry behind them because that helps us understand, all right? There's two major categories of pharmaceutical treatments for ADHD. Number one, there are stimulants, okay? You are taking pharmaceutical grade stimulants that rev the body up, which is a little paradoxical. If you have a child who is hyper, who is bouncing off the walls, who can't sit and pay attention, you're giving them a pharmaceutical stimulant to calm them down. And let me interrupt now and say Alexandra, who is our big, wonderful family support group in Romania. So if any of you are in Romania or near Romania, reach out to Alexandra Ion. She is fabulous. She runs this great support group, and she just donated some Facebook stars. So thank you, Alexandra, for the Facebook stars. Facebook stars are a way to give money to a Facebook Live speaker. We take 100% of our Facebook star donation and pass it on to autism family support groups such as TACA and Autism Alliance. So thank you for the stars. And again, if you are out there in Eastern Europe, in the Romania area, reach out to her. She's helping so many families out there. All right. Back to understanding pharmaceutical treatment of ADHD so we can understand the biology behind it. Stimulants: Ritalin, methylphenidate, Concerta, Adderall, Vyvanse, Quillavant. Okay, there's a lot of different names for a lot of the same things. You're stimulating someone and they are calming down. They are more focused, all right? That stimulation occurs with the activation of dopamine and norepinephrine in the brain. So let me say that again. Pharmaceutical stimulants for ADHD increase dopamine and norepinephrine in the brain and help us with more focus and attention. Great. Now, that doesn't work for everybody because we have a lot of kids who are hyper, who can't focus. They go on a stimulant and they get more hyper and more crazy, okay, and have massive sleep problems because you're taking somebody who is already hyperstimulated and stimulating them more. And guess what? That doesn't work. What is confusing is that the symptoms of somebody who needs a stimulant and someone who is too stimulated have the same symptoms. And that's really confusing for us because we see a child who's hyper, we see a child who has problem focusing and paying attention and listening and responding to what we're asking. And that can be from two different opposite biological causes, either understimulated, low dopamine, low norepinephrine, or overstimulated, high dopamine, high norepinephrine, okay? But if you've ever tried a stimulant and it's helped your child, then we know that their dopamine levels are probably low. We can test for this stuff in the urine through local labs, through insurance, which is great. But if you've tried a stimulant and it helped, it probably meant they have low dopamine. If you've tried a stimulant and it's made them worse, they probably have high dopamine. Okay. Now, let's go over into the other secondary category of pharmaceutical treatments for ADHD. And these are sedatives. These are relaxants. The two big ones are Intuniv and guanfacine. Okay, those are the most common ones, and those are blood pressure medications. Those reduce the blood pressure in your child, okay, to reduce blood pressure up in the brain. And by reducing the blood pressure in the brain doesn't get as much blood, it seems to calm them down. Many of your kids may be on guanfacine right now just to help behaviors. So we have these hyperactive behavior kids, and again, they are calmed down by medications that reduce their blood pressure. Can also help with ADHD. So that being said, I think there's better ways to calm somebody down who has high dopamine versus blood pressure medication, but at least you can take a look at what conventional medicine does and understand why it works for some people, why it causes side effects in some people. We haven't even gotten into the side effects of pharmaceutical stimulants, which include cardiac issues and growth problems, okay? So there's a multitude of reasons I don't even like those medications for other reasons. So, that being said, let's take that concept understanding of biology and move it into natural treatments. Same biology, same things happening inside the body, but a different way to treat it, okay? So we can stimulate dopamine production, just like the pharmaceuticals are increasing dopamine activity. We can increase dopamine levels in the brain. We can also, and that's for the kids who need stimulation, we can also help kids calm down. So for the kids who are overstimulated and they take an ADHD stimulant and get worse, those are the kids that need relaxation. Now, I'm not going to go for the guanfacine or Intuniv or pharmaceutical. I'm always going to use something natural. So we're either going to naturally stimulate or naturally relax. So those are our two options. All right, so how do we do that? That all has to do with the biology of the production of these chemicals in the brain. So we're worried about dopamine and norepinephrine, which are practically identical, very similar chemicals, and calming things such as serotonin, all right? Serotonin calms, dopamine stimulates. Which does your child need? We can figure out with lab testing for brain chemicals, which we do different kind of urine tests to analyze, or you can just try these different supplements, see which ones work, all right? So in order to produce any of these things, in order to produce any brain chemical, whether it be dopamine, norepinephrine, or serotonin, these are all made of proteins. These are all made of amino acids. Amino acids are the building blocks of protein, okay? So using the amino acids can work to change brain chemical levels. Excuse me, never mind can work, they do work. That's what they do. They change brain chemical levels when you give amino acids, period, all right? Can that have a same or similar or better effect than the pharmaceuticals? Yes. So going back into the research, you gotta dig really far back, because once ADHD stimulants came on the market back in the 80s, very little research has been done on natural things that do the same thing. So we're gonna be looking at some really old research studies that highlight natural therapies, natural amino acid treatments, before the whole pharmaceutical ADHD rage came out, and that's kind of dominated the science. Here's one of my favorite studies, because this study has been, scrubbed from the internet. So this study doesn't exist anymore because they pulled it away because they don't want you to read it, okay? Treatment of ADHD with monoamine amino acid precursors, okay? And basically what this says is amino acids will treat ADHD, okay? And that's why they took this research study, they scrubbed it, from reality and the internet, because they don't want you to know this. They don't want you to know that amino acids can work just as well as pharmaceuticals for ADHD, okay? So let's take a read here. This study took a bunch of kids. Actually, how many kids did they take here? 85. So it's 85 kids, all right? 67, and they gave them different amino acids. 67% of participants achieved significant improvement with only amino acid precursors of serotonin and dopamine. So they increased serotonin and dopamine levels with amino acids. And then after that 67%, an additional 30% achieved significant relief following 2 or 3 urine assays and dose changes based on those results. So again, what this study did, which is what we do in our office, we test for brain chemicals, we test for amino acids, we supplement with the amino acids that increase dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin, and changes happen. Things improve, okay? Based on this research study, a good 2/3 of the kids are gonna do well. All right, here is, and again, let's now get into the individual amino acids and the research behind them. Dopamine and norepinephrine are created by an amino acid called tyrosine and an amino acid called phenylalanine. I like tyrosine, and I use tyrosine because it works faster and it is tasteless, versus phenylalanine, which works slower and has a horrible taste. So when we're trying to create powders for our kids, we like tasteless things. So tyrosine creates dopamine and norepinephrine. Here is a case report, okay? Case report of a 4-year-old boy. He had a diagnosis of ADHD combined type. He was given a tyrosine supplement at this dose and had significant improvement in his ADHD. Okay, now that's just one case study. So let's go to another study at, oh, you know what? RT just asked a question. Can you lower adrenaline? Yes, you can. Try our anger management product. That lowers your adrenaline. Here is a research study back from 91, so we're going over 30 years ago, where tyrosine, that amino acid we just talked about that helps with dopamine, potentiates methylphenidate-induced, boy, I can't even read more, increases to extracellular dopamine. So let me read that again. Tyrosine potentiates the methylphenidate-induced increase in extracellular dopamine. Let me translate that into better terms. If you give Ritalin, okay, and you give tyrosine with the Ritalin, it's going to keep dopamine levels high in the brain. That's what we're trying to do. That's the goal of stimulant therapy, okay? Now, that's using both together. I would just rather use the natural stuff solo. So here's a research study. Again, we're going back to 1990, before the pharmaceuticals kind of took over. Plasma amino acids in attention deficit disorder, we see ADD subjects had significantly lower levels of phenylalanine, which I just mentioned, and the tyrosine, which we just mentioned, along with tryptophan and histidine. So here's a research study showing that the amino acid levels, tyrosine, which creates the dopamine, is lower in kids with ADD and ADHD, okay? They also mentioned tryptophan. Now, tryptophan, wait a minute, that's the stuff in turkey. It makes me calm, makes me happy, makes me relaxed. Why? Tryptophan makes serotonin, okay? So using the tryptophan is going to help with your kids who need that calming, who need that relaxing, okay? So here's a research study. Again, this one's not too old, 2015. Do serotonin deficits mediate susceptibility to ADHD, okay? And here we go. Administration of that tryptophan, the amino acid precursor of serotonin, significantly alleviates ADHD symptoms. Let me say that again. Tryptophan, a protein, an amino acid, okay, significantly alleviates ADHD symptoms. So whether we're giving tyrosine for more dopamine and more norepinephrine, whether we're giving tryptophan, and I like to use the form 5-HTP, why? Works faster and it's tasteless versus the tryptophan. So using 5-HTP to create more serotonin, using the tyrosine to create more dopamine, we can increase those brain chemical levels quick and easy and help our kids, okay? One more research study, because again, I'm blown away with how old these research studies are and how ignored they are. Why haven't we learned from what we researched decades ago, okay? Still matters. It's still important information. Back from 1985, I'm singing some Journey songs in my head thinking about those years. Catecholamine metabolism in the attention deficit disorder, implications for precursor therapy, and again, tyrosine, a catecholamine or a dopamine norepinephrine precursor, is capable of augmenting central dopamine and norepinephrine inside the brain. So, some great research that easily shows that how our body works. How does our body work? We make everything in our body, every single chemical from the foods we eat, the water we drink, and the air we breathe, period. Chemicals in the brain come from proteins. They come from amino acids. Tyrosine makes dopamine and norepinephrine. These are stimulants that make the brain go faster, work very similar to the ADHD stimulants, okay? Now we have 5-HTP. We have tryptophan, which makes serotonin, which makes you calm down, which makes you relax. Also can help ADHD. Kind of similar to the pharmaceutical non-stimulants, but those are blood pressure medications that have nothing to do with serotonin, so it's different in its biology, but it's similar in its effect. We're either stimulating or we're relaxing. Now, which does your child need? Kind of hard to tell unless you do a brain chemical analysis. The way we do it in our office with our patients is we collect a urine sample, we send it to a regular lab like Quest or LabCorp or your hospital. They'll tell you, here's your dopamine level, here's your serotonin level, here's your amino acid level, here's your tryptophan level, here's your tyrosine level. Just like these research studies showed, you can do this through a urine sample, through your insurance, through a local lab. If you don't want to do that, it's fine. You can try the supplements, okay? Try our serotonin supplement, which is super serotonin, all right? That'll increase your serotonin levels. If you want to try more dopamine, try our attention on the double supplement. It's going to increase your dopamine levels, okay? One other thing we haven't talked about, and I don't currently have any research about it, but it usually works pretty well. If your child has a really quick trigger or a really quick fuse, and just once they're hit with any kind of stress, they just stop and they break down, okay? That is a cortisol problem. It's really not a focus problem, it's a stress problem. But some of our kids get overwhelmed easy, and they just, I don't want to do this, shut down, forget about it, okay? That has to do with cortisol imbalances, and so I would highly recommend something like our temper tamer supplement, which is going to help balance cortisol levels, which, yes, it can help with the focus, but it doesn't help with your ability to focus. It helps with your desire, all right? These are the kids who don't do stuff in school, but can well hyper-focus on anything they like. If they're watching TV, they're doing Legos, they're playing on their tablet, whatever, they can handle that kind of focus because they enjoy it, but put them in a situation where they're not comfortable and they break down and they put up their walls, that has to do with cortisol. So you can use any of these supplements individually, the temper tamer, attention on the double, the super serotonin, you can use them all together. Okay? But what I always recommend to people is let's start introducing things one at a time so you can watch the results. Because if it's working, you want to know which one's working. If there's a side effect, which is usually behavioral, then you want to know which is causing a side effect. And again, anything that's sold on our website, we've got a 30-day return policy. So if you try something, you don't like it, your kid doesn't want to take it, you change your mind, I don't care. send it back for a refund. I'd rather you try something and send it back than not try it at all, because there's too many things out there that can help your child.